Steve, it is a pleasure to have you on the Books4Guys podcast. How are you this week?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, Chris. I'm excited to be here. The
Yeah,
week's been great.
yeah, no, that's awesome. I am I'm excited for this conversation and for us to be able to meet face to face in a way now. You and I've been able to talk on the phone a couple times, and thank you. I've got your book here. Thank you for sending it to me, and the personal
Great.
note that means a lot. And I read it within a couple of days, and then my wife, she saw it on our nightstand, and she was like, "You know what? That looks really good. I'm going to read it." And I was like, "Yep, you should." So she's going to read it next.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Great to hear.
Yeah, yeah. Well, man, Steve, let's dive in here because your story is very unique. I think I posted on LinkedIn today of how it puts a lot of things in perspective. It did for me as I was reading it, as that's not what you went through is not something I had to go through, and I couldn't imagine what that's like at 18 years old. But for those who haven't read your book, Grapefruit, man, just kind of talk about your story a little bit and what transpired.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with what happened to me. So I graduated high school in 1986. And so this was a long time ago, but graduated high school, and about a month after, maybe 6 weeks after graduating from high school, I went in to have a biopsy done, and there were some things that led up to this, but had a biopsy done on my neck. I had a mass kind of protruding out of my neck that was growing pretty quickly towards the end. And so they did the biopsy, and then on July 4th, right after I graduated high school, the surgeon called the house and said three words nobody wants to hear, which is "You have cancer." And so that was shocking for all of us. I felt pretty good, other than this lump in my neck. I felt I was running, had run track in high school, was running 10Ks, was in really good shape, and so, yeah, it definitely put me on a different path, but went in and got more tests done to find out how much it had spread. And we found out it was stage 3, which meant that it was in 3 parts of my body. It was also in my neck, or it was in my neck, but it was also my chest and
Mm.
stomach. And so that required chemotherapy. So pretty quickly I got started on chemo and spent what would have been my first year going off to college, which is what all my friends did.
Yep.
I spent that year at home going through chemo, just violently sick each time. Lost all my hair at the time. I used to have nice hair back then. Now I'm bald again. Um, but yeah, I lost all my hair, and had a lot of side effects. For example, I would get mouth sores to the point
Yeah.
where I couldn't eat or drink anything. But yeah, it was a lonely year, Chris. It was my social life pretty much dried up, and spent about 10 months roughly going through chemo until I was declared cancer free.
Yeah.
So
Man,
that's
that's
probably a good place to start.
yeah. Well, and as I was reading it, at the age of 18, it's a weird time because you don't realize time just feels a little bit different. You don't look too far ahead. When you get a diagnosis like that, or just simple like going through a breakup, you think life's over. You're like, my life's done. You're worried about college, and all of a sudden your world's just rocked. I was just trying to put myself back at that age and what it would have felt like if I'd have got a similar diagnosis, and like what my thoughts would have been as I was reading your book, and I just like it's hard to fathom. Even reading what you described as what you were going through is kind of hard to think about. Like, I just don't know mentally that's just probably one of the toughest things you could ever have to experience.
Yeah, one of the things you read about, that probably gives your listeners a good indication of where my life was and where it was headed. But when the surgeon called that morning, I had my mom and dad were there. It was July 4th, so my dad was off work. We were anxiously waiting what the results were. I think my parents they told me there was a 30% chance it was going to be cancer, and at 18, you think you're invincible, you think you're going to live
Yeah.
forever. So it never phased me. I didn't think it was going to be cancer.
Yeah.
My parents, on the other hand, were more worried and concerned. And then I had two siblings, and when the surgeon called, he made it a point, I think, because of what my parents had shared with him, to tell me that I couldn't drink or do any drugs for the next year. And he said, probably never will you be able to drink again, but definitely over the course of the next year. And so that's when I started crying. That's when I was upset. And so my high school career, if you will, was one of heavy drinking and drug use, and I was headed down a pretty bad path. And so one of the first benefits that cancer ended up giving me was the fact that it put me on a new path. It kind of forced me on that path. I do believe, Chris, if I had gone off to college in the fall like I was supposed to, I would have failed out. I had already wrecked my parents' cars 5 times under
Yeah.
the influence of alcohol. So I think I was headed down a bad path, and God and cancer intervened and put me on a different path.
Yeah. Yeah, he intervened in a strong way.
Yeah, yeah,
It
he did.
it's funny how he does that, when needed, but yeah, that was another thing I took from your book was just yeah, and I appreciate you being so open about this stuff, and it was just I'm sure just being vulnerable and talking about some of those struggles, just took a lot, to think through and talk through, but, and I enjoyed reading it too because I spent a lot of time in Atlanta, so some of the landmarks and places you lived, I could kind of picture some of this and where some of this was going on. But Steve, in high school, it sounds like you grew up with a good family, good parents, good siblings. What do you think? What do you think led to you kind of going off on a path that wasn't as straight as maybe your parents had hoped for you to?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. I think kind of publishing this book and I've been asked that question a lot, has helped me maybe frame that up in my head. I did grow up in a great family. My parents are still married, still alive. They've been married, I think, 60 something years at this point.
Yeah,
Um, and so, yeah, they've always had a strong marriage. And then I've got, a brother and a sister that have both been married for a long time and have kids. And so, um, I don't have a great excuse, and I don't want to blame it on something else. I think I probably struggled with the moves. We had a couple moves that we did, and I think they just were not at a great age. Specifically, the second one, we moved from the Northeast down to the Southeast, and again, this is back in the 80s,
yeah,
and I ended up going to high school in a very rural area. But we moved down. There was no middle school in Atlanta at the time, and so I spent a year in seventh grade, being the oldest in elementary school, and being my first year and not knowing anybody, to
yeah,
then immediately going off to high school in eighth grade with juniors and seniors that towered over me. And
yeah,
then just the culture change. It was kind of a redneck area that I went to high school in, and I just think I struggled with all that. Probably, alcohol and eventually some drugs were kind of the result of that. The other thing is when I was, a lot of times your friends' older siblings can lead to trouble.
yeah,
And when I was, I write about this in my book, but the summer after sixth grade, I went up to visit a friend back in the Northeast, and his older sister and boyfriend took us to their parents' beach house. And the first night, I think they went out and bought us some alcohol. And again, I was summer after sixth grade. I might have been 12.
yeah,
And we just got drunk first night. And then the next night, they pulled out marijuana, and we got stoned the second night. And so to this day, that still amazes me because I've got two kids in their 20s now, and I couldn't imagine them doing that at 12 years old. But that was kind of the first, and then
yeah.
I think, just kind of the moving, some of that maybe I didn't, alcohol was a way to socialize and meet people, and I latched onto that pretty heavily.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it. I saw it with my friends growing up, or people that I was acquaintance with. Yeah, and I get, at that age again, you're kind of easily influenced, and even in a good family and stuff, it's easy to get to veer off depending on who you're around and who's influencing you. And I mean, that's tough. I think about that and I'm like, wow, I think I was a pretty good kid, but I definitely, if I'd have hung around some other people a little bit more, that could have changed things a little bit, probably for me even. And um, yeah, and then just it takes you back to those days, and you're just sitting there thinking like, "Whoo, man, I dodged probably some bullets there that you unfortunately kind of got caught up into." And then yeah, the diagnosis, it's like again, world rocked, but you came out on top of it. I mean, you went to Georgia. You've had a great, you know, career since then. Have had a great family. So what ultimately determined and motivated you to write the book? Because a lot of years have gone past since that. But what inspired you to actually put pen to paper and put this story out there?
Yeah, good question. I joke that it took me 37 years to write and publish it, which is pretty true, though. Life kept getting in the way.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the book, Chris, and in hindsight, I've thought about this too since I've published and have been interviewed about the book. But I'm glad that it took 37 years because the first half, there's a part one and a part two. And part one really was when I was going through cancer, all my friends went off to college. A lot of my drinking buddies disappeared. Many of them I haven't seen since. So it was a very lonely year and it was a very tough year. And so my mom and I think my dad too encouraged me to write a journal. And
Mm,
so I did. I filled up a thick notebook of I just jotted stuff down on what I was feeling, what I was experiencing, what was happening. And part one is essentially my journal that I eventually cleaned up, and through the help of some editors and some writing courses and things like that, I took that journal, and that was part one, which is really what happened, why it happened, how it happened. But part two, because it took me 37 years to write, and I would pick it up. I'm in sales, so I travel a lot. My kids were younger, doing sports and school and all that. Life just kept getting in the way. And so I would pick it up, maybe not touch it for a few years, pick it back up. So part two is really um, how my perspective changed and how I ended up viewing cancer as really the best thing that could have happened to me at that point in my life. And then I talk about how it impacted the way that I'm a husband, father, friend, business leader, and my faith. I would say those are kind of the five aspects of my life that I talk about how cancer um, probably better positioned me for each of those five things.
yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed your chapter, especially on like empathy. As just talk a little bit about part two, because and I don't want to go specific, but you talk about empathy. You have a chapter on the one you feed, and the other pay it forward. What? Why did you title those the way you did? And what were some of the lessons you want people to take from those? Because the empathy chapter really grabbed me more than anything in part two.
Yeah, I would say I'll get to that in just a sec. I'd say the values, the first one that teed up the rest of them was perspective.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so what did it for me there, I went off to Georgia, as you mentioned, went off, tried to live a normal life and 4 years in college, had a lot of fun, joined a fraternity, and it was going to football games at UGA and tailgating. It was like night and day, heaven and hell difference between what was happening to me the year prior to that year. But at Christmas that I was off at school, I went home, and for the first time ever, 6 months after I finished chemo, I watched the movie "It's a Wonderful Life." And if you've seen that, the main character is kind of down on his luck and down on life, and kind of a glass half empty perspective. And an angel grants him a wish that he had never been born, and he kind of sees what life would be like without him in it. And so that movie really resonated with me, and it started to shape the way that I looked at cancer, and it started to change my perspective. And once that started happening, it was over the course of years, but I started thinking about kind of the positives, and obviously cancer put me on a different path.
yeah.
But then the second was probably gratitude. The day the oncologist told me that I was cured and and
Yeah.
finished was, I can't come up with a day that compares to that from a gratitude perspective. But I
Yeah.
try to live my life, work, personal, my kids. I try to live my life in gratitude. The empathy part you asked about, there were several ways I think that empathy was sharpened from my experience with cancer. One, I think there was a big realization that a lot of times, like we all have stuff. I'm not unique. We all have things in life that are those low points, those hurdles we have to get past, and you often don't know unless they're super, in your tight circle. You don't know what other people are going through and what they're experiencing. And I think that really hit me that year. Number one. Number two, some of the people that are heroes in my story that kind of stood by me that year, my parents, again, I put them through you know, so much hell trying to raise a rebellious teenager. The minute that I was sick, they flipped. They flipped, and they were the most supportive, caring, possible parents that they could have been. My siblings, same thing. Had a couple buddies that really stood by me that year, and so I think just gratitude for that, but then also empathy and wanting to pay it forward for other people. um, I think all those qualities, I think really cancer helped me fine tune those and really try to live those as core principles.
Yeah.
So those would be kind of the ones that came out and ended up impacting the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, that part too really got me because we've kind of experienced it in my household. My wife was recently diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic, out of the blue, and she's the most like healthiest person, most fit, hardworking, and ended up in the hospital for 4 days, not knowing what was wrong. But I've seen some of the gratitude piece and the empathy, and then this kind of transpire in her, and me kind of learning from her as being close to the situation. And so as I was reading it, obviously cancer is different, but I'm excited for her to read your book because I think there's going to be like some correlation of the way that she's thought and we've thought and how we've gotten through that and overcome that. And then now we're, at a place of gratitude and more empathy to others as we, because it is it's something I have to work on is I haven't been through a lot of this personally. And so having to kind of pause and better listen to people or better know that I don't know what's going on in other people's worlds. So kind of like, thinking about that when I'm communicating with others and such. So it's a word that when I see it and hear it, I kind of dive in a little deeper because it's something I've been personally trying to practice a little bit more. So just you having that chapter titled that was something that grabbed me and made me pay attention to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's helped me a lot in, as I mentioned, I have a career in sales and leadership, and I think the best salespeople I've learned over time are not, they don't have the gift of gab or the big talkers. They're good at asking questions and listening
Mhm.
and uncovering what the customer needs and what their pain points are, and then, providing a solution to help them. And I think empathy is one of the key, I think, core characteristics of a top salesperson. And so I tried to sell that way and really tried to perfect that as I was selling, and then it has served me well in leadership as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for someone who, they plan to read your book and they plan to buy it, what's I guess what's kind of you've kind of explained some of this, but what do you hope someone takes from it when they read your story, and what's something that you hope they apply to their life after reading your book?
Yeah, I hope it, in a nutshell, Chris, I hope it allows them or enables them to look at adversity and things that they go through, whether it's a job loss or divorce or grief. As I mentioned, we're all going to go through those trials and tribulations in our life, but that it'll empower people to look back on those, and have a different perspective to grow and transform from that. And how can that make my life better coming out the other side? That's what I was able to do with cancer. And I hope that it provides people with that perspective and gives them the tools to be able to grow through those challenges that we all face.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Yeah, like I said earlier, it definitely put some things in perspective for me. We all have tough days and tough things to go through, but I haven't had to battle cancer, thank God, and I haven't had to battle a lot of things, and so I immediately makes me more thankful. Like, hey, I've got it pretty good. There's people that have gone through things a lot worse than me. And I'm a pretty positive person overall, but it just still those kind of moments of reading your story, it's like, man, what am I complaining about over here? Like, I'm very blessed to not have to do that, or I'm very blessed in everyday life. And so, for sure, for me, it made me think of perspective in a lot of things. And I think a lot of other people will get exactly that and think that way too. Um, Steve, one more question for you, and I ask everyone who's been on the podcast, and we talk about this. Obviously, your story is one that I can't wait to share because part of my mission is to show young guys um, that they're probably going to face something of struggle. It may not be cancer, but they may lose a parent at an early age, or they may lose a job, or have a tough time finding a job, or men they may go through divorce. There may be something they have to overcome, but knowing they can get to the other side, and so having positive conversations like this with you who have overcome something is something I want to share. But I always ask too, what are some books or people in your life that you specifically, at least one book, what's a book that's had an impact on you personally or professionally that when asked you recommend it to others, or maybe it's one you've read multiple times throughout your life, but what's a book or two that have meant a lot to you?
Yeah, I'll give you three real quick. And I was thinking about, I've watched, a number of your episodes, so I know you asked this question, so I came prepared. But I think all three of them are examples of people overcoming adversity. But I absolutely love two books that were both historical, actual events that happened. One was called In the Thin Air by John Krakauer, and it was about the Mount Everest disaster in 1997, I think it was, with the group climbing Mount Everest, and a bad storm came in. Love that book. And then similar, there's a book called In Harm's Way by
Mm,
Doug Stanton, and it's about the USS Indianapolis that was sunk at the end of World War II, and like 1,500 soldiers went into the water, and they get divided into like three groups and are out lost at sea for about 4 or 5 days. I think about two-thirds of them perished. Um, but those two books were great. The third one that I read more recently is called On Fire by John O'Leary. Gentleman spoke to our company, and he was burned as a 7-year-old, I think it was, burned on 98% of his body, and or 99% of his body. He was given a 1% chance to live. And his story is, very different from my story, but similar in the fact that, he took something awful, and it's changed the way that he lives his life. And there's actually a movie right now, I think it's called Soul on Fire, that's in theaters. That's his life story. So it just became a motion picture, but it's called On Fire by John O'Leary. And I thought the book was fantastic, and I plan on going to see the movie.
okay, cool. I haven't read any of those three books, so I'm gonna add those to my want to read list, because try to get those knocked out. And so it's uh it's incredible. I got to figure out how to start doing some audiobooks because I get recommended so many, and I'm just such a physical book reader. I'm like, I got to figure out a quicker way to get these read.
Yeah. My wife
Yeah,
does the audiobooks. I prefer a book in hand. My book just came out on audio a couple weeks ago. So,
yeah,
but yeah, I prefer the physical book myself.
yeah, yeah. No, me too. But I'm like, I got to figure out how to do the audio thing because I got so many I want to read. It's so little time, and
Yeah.
so. But Steve, no, thank you so much. I think your story is going to have an impact on a lot of people, and so I'm so happy that you wrote the book. Again, I read it in less than 2 days, and my wife's about to read it, and I think she's going to find a lot of value and just lesson in it. And we've got it on the Books for Guys website, so anyone can go purchase it. The audiobook takes you right to the Amazon link, so go grab that. But Steve, can't wait to see the impact that you have now that the book's out. Can't wait to see all that you do, and I can't, I'm going to be following you to see everything that you're talking on and being a part of. And so, man, we're always here for you to do anything you need, and just can't wait to see all you do and all the positive that you create through this story.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that, and I also appreciate you having me on your show.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate the support. And no, thanks again, Steve. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.